and between us, we'll do our best to answer your questions. It's going to be a very, very practical session, giving you the tools that you can then incorporate and apply in your life. I suppose my take in terms of sleep is that I had poor sleep for many, many years, and I was lucky enough to come across the Buteyko method back in 1998, and I practiced it. Up until then, for the first 26, 27 years of my life, I was a chronic mouth breather, stuffy nose, and waking up feeling quite unrefreshed in the morning. There's a couple of points to take from this. If you have a stuffy nose, you don't just have a stuffy nose, you're also more likely to have poor sleep. If you wake up with a dry mouth in the morning, you're also more likely to have poor sleep and wake up feeling unrefreshed. In terms of sleep disorders themselves, nowadays they get a lot of attention. But the one aspect that's often overlooked is your everyday breathing. And that's really what I want to look at upon. The research is there, slowly but surely it's happening. I wrote a review paper with 2 ear, nose, and throat doctors that was published a couple of years ago in the Journal of Clinical Medicine. And that was looking at the application of functional breathing for the phenotypes of obstructive sleep apnea. I'm not going to go too heavy in terms of the science, but I would like to give you some application in terms of the science so that you have an understanding as well of what's going on. I think it's very motivating. And also, when you see that connection, you will feel it's worthwhile then putting the exercise into practice. I'll keep the exercise very, very simple. The objective here is that you can bring them into your way of life. And, in terms of sleep, you can make differences pretty quickly. I would expect an improvement in your sleep within 1 week if you start putting this into practice. So what I'm going to do is go through some theory and also then plenty of practice. And the last part of the webinar today is all about questions and answers. So you may have some questions and answers, so kind of compile them. Neve is going to help answer them in the background. If you're on YouTube, Owen is going to help answer them there as well. And ultimately, though, we will have some time towards the end for questions and answers. This webinar is 2 hours long, so we're going to cover a lot in 2 hours. And it's pretty much a model of when I'm working with my own clients. So working with my own clients over the last 23 years, what instruction would I give them specifically when they come in with sleep problems? So the session is recorded and you will also get access then to the recording itself. So let's start. So the whole objective here is the key to waking up feeling refreshed. And of course, if we have conditions such as insomnia, which is very, very common, it's 30% of the population, and 10% have it chronically, and 8.4% of people in the US are taking sleeping pills. And very often, of course, that's to help falling asleep. Upper airway resistance syndrome, I will go through this. This is a condition that often doesn't get a whole lot of attention. It affects more women than men. And the symptoms can be very much in terms of anxiety, panic disorder, fibromyalgia, etc. And the problem with upper airway resistance syndrome is it often flies underneath the radar. If you do a sleep study, your blood oxygen saturation doesn't necessarily reduce, nor are you stopping breathing during sleep, but at the same time you have symptoms as a result of a narrowing of the airway and the increased effort it takes to breathe. So upper airway resistance syndrome is a very interesting one because it often doesn't get so much attention. We will look at snoring. So in terms of mouth snoring and nose snoring, the application of that, and I can go as deep as you want in terms of obstructive sleep apnea. So as I said, I can't help to answer in terms of, well, I'll do my best in terms of the science. And I want to kind of make it simple as well because people here will be of all levels. You might be asking the question, why breathing matters, but it's ultimately that how you breathe during the day is going to influence how you breathe during your sleep. And if you have mouth open, upper chest breathing, breathing faster, breathing harder during the day, that will translate into mouth open, faster breathing, harder breathing during sleep. And it's never just about the airway. Doctors will always look at the airway. They talk about the diameter of the airway. We need to also consider what flows through it. And any engineer who's looking at the pipe, a diameter of a pipe, they will always consider flow. So sleep medicine, while it focuses primarily on the airway, we need to focus on your everyday breathing patterns. Now, airway, of course, is important. And the key with breathing is that breathing should have little or no resistance. And say, for example, what is resistance? Resistance is the effort it takes for air to flow from your nose, from your mouth, into your lungs. And if there's some resistance to breathing, it increases the effort involved with breathing. And if, for example, the resistance is relatively high, this in turn can reduce airflow. Not enough oxygen is getting into the body. Carbon dioxide is also going to accumulate because it can't get out so readily. And this in turn then will contribute to the brain waking you up from sleep. Now, you may not be aware of it. There can be micro arousals. In other words, that you're taking out of deep sleep into lighter sleep. You're not necessarily aware of it, but you will wake up feeling unrefreshed. So if we look at it this way, no resistance would be when your breathing is absolutely silent, in and out through the nose, and your breathing is unimpeded. No restriction to your breathing. You know, this is really an ideal situation. And even with children, we should never hear a child breathing. The first signs of resistance to breathing is that you're going to have audible breathing. So you start to hear the person breathing. It's not quite snoring, but you can hear the person breathe. And even this resistance to breathing is significant in children. The next signs that there's some additional resistance to breathing, which would be moderate resistance. And you can see that the airway is narrowing here, and it takes more effort to breathe. And snoring then can arise as a result of turbulence inside in the nose, and the nose where it meets the back of the throat, and also at the back of the mouth. If resistance to breathing increases more towards severe, sorry, Neve, if you don't mind muting, thanks very much. Towards severe, you see now that the airway is narrowing even further, and now this leads to then what's called a hypopnea, and a hypopnea is when there's a reduction of airflow by about 30% or so, causing a lowering of blood oxygen saturation by 3% or more, or 4% or more. And this isn't an apnea, so the person is still breathing, but it's just that their airway has narrowed quite considerably. Now we are in the spectrum now of obstructive sleep apnea. If the resistance then is going from severe into very severe, now we have a stopping of the breath. Airflow simply can't travel from the nose to the lungs. And this is because the upper airway is collapsed. And when we think about the upper airway, you're pretty much thinking about the throat, and of course where the mouth meets the throat and where the nose meets the throat. So that would be the upper airway. It is collapsible. There are some muscles in the throat that are designed to help maintain an open airway, but these muscles don't always do their job as effectively as they should do, especially as we get a bit older. There are risk factors, of course, associated with causing narrowing of the airway, and we will go through some of them as well. So resistance to breathing is key. It's key to look at. Now, does upper airway resistance syndrome fall into the spectrum? Researchers are debating it. They're not quite sure, but you could say that, well, upper airway resistance syndrome, given that the word resistance is in the title, it's important to help open the airway. So even with upper airway resistance syndrome, there is some narrowing of the airway, which is causing increased effort to breathe, which is causing the person to come out of deep sleep and spend more time in light sleep. So ultimately, deep sleep is so important because, of course, this is when the brain is cleaning itself, and we have the glymphatic system. So if, for example, we're spending more time in light sleep, not enough time in deep sleep, then we wake up feeling unrefreshed. So the role of a narrow airway. So we spoke about this in terms of snoring, obstructive sleep apnea. Restricted airflow creates airway vibrations resulting in snoring. I will look at this a little bit more. And a narrow airway increases negative pressure. So if you're trying to draw air into your lungs and the airway is quite narrow, that's going to increase negative pressure inside the airway, which in turn can pull the soft tissues inwards. In other words, the suction pressure as air is drawn into the lungs is contributing to the airways collapsing. And factors that narrow the airway when it comes to breathing, well, do you have your mouth open? Do you have your mouth open during sleep? And even you can kind of see in the image here of the young girl, her mouth is open and her lower jaw is going to be falling back into the airway. Our airway is not that big. The size of your airway, the diameter of your airway, meaning your throat, the upper airway, is about the size of your thumb, or it's about the width of a garden hose pipe. So it's not that wide. So we don't have much room for maneuvering here. And if the mouth is open, the lower jaw is falling down and back, and it's coming into the airway. The other thing about mouth open is that we have a low tongue resting posture. We cannot have our tongue resting on the roof of the mouth if, for example, we are breathing through the mouth. Because in order to breathe through the mouth, the tongue has to lower. Now, the problem with a low tongue resting posture is that this low tongue resting posture is more likely to encroach the airway. Another aspect with mouth breathing is that it does contribute to fast breathing and shallow breathing. And this does contribute to drying out the upper airways, contributing to inflammation. You could regard it as causing trauma to the upper airway, and that in turn causes narrowing. So I would say to anybody, never wake up with a dry mouth in the morning. It was the one thing that really made a huge difference with me in my life. People can talk about sleep hygiene. They can talk about the cool and the airy bedroom. They can talk about, having silence in the room, switching off your mobile phone, sleeping for the right number of hours. But I will say that the elephant in the room when it comes to sleep is breathing in and out through your mouth. It is absolutely the worst thing that could be possibly done. It definitely makes an impact in sleep. The science still needs to catch up. However, the leading sleep doctor in the world, unfortunately passed on in 2019, Dr. Christian Guilleminault, for the last few years of his life, and he is the doctor that coined the phrase obstructive sleep apnea. He developed the apnea-hypopnea index, so he would be a leading figure in terms of sleep. He talked about the importance of nose breathing during sleep. He was aware of it. It still has to trickle down into medicine and sleep medicine, encouraging people breathe in and out through your nose, even if you're wearing a mandibular advancement device or if, for example, you're on a CPAP. Mouth snoring, it's going to be quite common, and this is caused by airflow turbulence when breathing through an open mouth. And you can make the sound of a mouth snore. So what I would like you to do, just as a demonstration, make the sound of a snore through your mouth, and it will go something like this. It's very distinctive. You can understand what's happening there. I'm drawing air in through my mouth. That air is meeting the back of the roof of the mouth, the soft palate and the throat, and it's causing turbulence. So even if you were to record somebody snoring, you will get an indication of whether they are snoring through their mouth or nose just by virtue of the sound. Now, I would like you to give that a go though. Make the sound of a snore through your mouth. And now close your mouth and try and snore through your mouth with your mouth closed. So try and snore through your mouth, not your nose. Can you snore through your mouth if your mouth is closed? And the answer is you can't. So if you can get your mouth closed during sleep, and of course, how you breathe during the day is going to influence how you breathe during sleep. It's very important to breathe through your nose during the day as well, and to help train yourself that you also have your mouth closed during sleep. So we can say that mouth snoring stops when you breathe exclusively in and out through your nose. In order to snore through your mouth, you have to be breathing through your mouth. And that alone is going to make quite a difference with people, just by getting the mouth closed. Nasal snoring. This is when there's turbulence inside the nose, when the nose meets the back of the throat. So we're talking about the nasopharynx. And this, of course, is not just contributed to by a narrow nasal passage, but also by how hard and fast do you breathe. So what is your everyday breathing? You will know the sound of a nasal snore because it sounds quite nasally, and it goes like this. So you can notice it by the nasally sound. Now, if you make that sound, what do you do to make that sound? You're tightening up the airway, but you're also increasing the speed and volume of which you are breathing. It's never just about the airway. We also have to consider flow. And later on, what I would like you to do is to breathe a little bit lighter and slower and try and snore through your nose. We may not completely stop nasal snoring, but we can make quite a difference. And of course, that's going to be depending on the airway. Insomnia. This is quite common. Probably more females experience insomnia than males. It's very much driven by hyperarousal. And of course, there's a feedback loop here as well. So say, for example, you have a lot of stress in your life, maybe in a particular day or a week or whatever, then it's difficulty falling asleep. As a result of the difficulty falling asleep or waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're waking up feeling tired, you're in an increased stress response. The increased stress response is feeding into the day, which is feeding into sleep. With insomnia, it's very important to convey to the brain that we're safe. With insomnia, it's very important to dampen the stress response and increase the body's relaxation response. And even switching to nasal breathing, because it imposes a resistance to your breathing during wakefulness, that in turn is going to help slow down your breath. And also by breathing in and out through your nose, you've got a better recruitment of the diaphragm. So I'm just going to come off the presentation just for a little bit. Like, there's always, when we think about breathing, always think about how do you breathe when you get into a difficult situation. And you will always be, you'll have an idea in terms of when you get stressed, your breathing gets faster, it gets harder, it's upper chest, you're taking more air into the body, you're breathing often through the mouth, you may be sighing more, or you're stopping breathing. And those are the typical characteristics of how we would breathe when we get into a difficult situation. Now, if we're breathing a little bit like that all the time, in terms of our everyday breathing, having the mouth open, breathing a little bit faster, a little bit harder, a little bit upper chest, we too are telling the brain that we're under threat. We always have to bear in mind that your brain is constantly spying on your breathing. Every breath that you take, your brain is spying on the breath. And your brain then is relaying that information to other parts of the brain. And if you're breathing fast and shallow during your sleep, your brain is also going to interpret that you're under threat. And in order to protect the body, the brain is going to waken you from sleep. So always consider your breathing patterns. So how can you convey to your brain that you're safe? It's not about breathing fast. It's not about breathing hard. It's not about breathing upper chest. It's not about breathing mouth. It's about breathing in and out through the nose, light, soft, slow, low. So that's what I'll go through. So all of those techniques as well, they will help with snoring. They will help with obstructive sleep apnea. They will help with upper airway resistance syndrome, and they will help with insomnia because of helping to bring balance to the autonomic nervous system. And it's not just people with insomnia who have increased stress response. If we have poor sleep, it puts us all into an increased stress response. And the thing about this is that if we have poor sleep quality, it has such an impact in our life, we often don't take it into consideration. It affects our food choices, for example, because if we're feeling tired during the day, we're going to be more likely to be inclined to eat foods that are going to give us a quick burst of energy, because we need energy. But of course, those foods that give us a quick burst of energy are going to be sugars and carbohydrates. That in turn is going to put on weight. We've got increased weight gain, which in turn feeds into snoring. It's feeding into obstructive sleep apnea, feeding into poor sleep, and then affecting our food choices during the day. And that's not even taken into consideration to change in hormones such as ghrelin. We eat more when we've poor sleep, and leptin. So in terms of leptin reduces and ghrelin increases. So there's a lot going on, productivity, concentration, focus, mental health. Sleep is really, really important, but your breathing during your sleep is also very, very important. So insomnia, I'll give you the tools to down-regulate, and also in terms of what to do if you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, because it can be quite challenging. So functional breathing is multidimensional, and this isn't just to make it more complex. This is just that the human body is a bit complex anyway. And in terms of breathing itself, nasal breathing, you could regard nasal breathing as a link, which is bringing all three together. The biochemical dimension focuses on carbon dioxide. The biomechanical dimension focuses on where are you breathing. In other words, are you breathing with good recruitment of the diaphragm, or are you breathing high in the upper chest? And the psychophysiological dimension is really the mind-body connection. So this is in terms of the autonomic nervous system. Now, ironically, if you want to increase your body oxygenation and your blood flow, it's not about taking full big breaths. There is a myth out there that the more oxygen you breathe in, the better. That is not true. The more air you breathe, you're not necessarily increasing oxygen in the blood. It's already almost fully saturated. But more air you breathe, you're getting rid of too much carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide isn't just a waste gas. So I will talk about that. And when you're practicing the exercises, I will also talk about the benefits in your everyday life about practicing the exercises. Functional breathing is all about breathing in and out through the nose. So during the day, there's increased resistance to your breathing by breathing through the nose. That's good. But during sleep, there's reduced airway resistance by breathing in and out through your nose because your tongue can rest in the roof of the mouth, the lower jaw is coming forward, and your nose is also protecting the airway. The air is warm, the air is moist coming in. It's got a better drive from the diaphragm. There's a better oxygen transfer from the lungs to the blood. You're harnessing nasal nitric oxide. There's really a lot happening with nasal breathing during sleep. How do you know if you have your mouth open? Well, do you wake up with a dry mouth in the morning? I will go through your control pause. This, in other words, this is the length of your comfortable breath hold time, and this will give you feedback on your functional breathing patterns. Correct tongue resting posture, we will look at this. In other words, the tongue should be resting up in the roof of the mouth. It shouldn't be in a low resting posture because otherwise it's going to infringe the airways. Light and slow breathing. So you practice breathing exercise during the day. Day in turn will improve your breathing patterns during sleep. And also, of course, the diaphragm. There is a connection between the diaphragm and the upper airway dilator muscles in the throat. So for those of you who are susceptible to your airway collapsing during sleep, if, for example, you have obstructive sleep apnea or even having upper airway resistance syndrome, that there can be a narrowing of the airway, we have to think, how can we get these muscles in the throat to do their job to keep the airway open? They're also connected with the diaphragm. I'd like you to give this a go. I'm going to take the camera off you. So I'd like you to give it a go in your own time. And this is your control pause. It's an important measurement. And more recently in obstructive sleep apnea, the length of your breath hold time is regarded as an indicator of whether you have what's called high loop gain. But let's give this a go, please. You're taking a normal breath in and out of your nose. You pinch your nose and you stop breathing. And you count in seconds. How many seconds can you hold your breath for? And when you resume breathing, you should have normal breathing. So the control pause is a measure of the length of time that you can hold your breath for and still have normal breathing. The control pause isn't about your maximum breath hold time. You could also regard the control pause as that you have a normal breath in and out through your nose, you hold your breath, you're timing it in seconds until you feel the first definite desire to breathe or the first involuntary movement of your diaphragm. In other words, if you stop breathing, how long does it take for your brain to react to the fact that you've stopped breathing? Now, even though this is a simple breath hold time, you don't need any equipment, it still gives you pretty good feedback on your breathing. And as I said, there is a more recent paper by McKeown looking at the application of measuring breath hold time in individuals with sleep apnea. So what does it mean? Well, if your control pause is less than 20 seconds, it indicates that your breathing is faster, your breathing is harder, you're more likely to be upper chest breathing during sleep. And that in turn then is going to increase snoring, and it increases resistance to breathing, which can contribute then to partial collapse of the airway or total collapse of the airway and result in obstructive sleep apnea. So we want to help build up the control pause. We want to increase it above 20 seconds, and that's very, very important. Now, nasal breathing, we will start off with that because this is the foundation. You typically sleep deeper. In other words, when you think about sleep, you've got light sleep, stage 1, and then you've got slightly deeper sleep, stage 2, and then you've got deep sleep, which is stage 3. And then you have REM. So in terms of sleep itself, when you're breathing in and out through your nose, your sleep is deeper. You will notice this when you wake up in the morning because you will wake up feeling more alert. You're in better form. You've got better concentration, better focus, and you're better able to prepare your day. When we're talking about sleep problems, it's so common and it crosses every walk of life. The diaphragm is linked to the throat muscles. We spoke about this, and this is why it's very important also to breathe in and out through the nose. What I would like you to do is, I would like you to look down at your chest and take the breath through the mouth. So look down at your chest and breathe through your mouth. And you'll see that when you have your mouth open and you're breathing through your mouth, you typically engage upper chest. So mouth breathing results in shallow breathing. And also when you're breathing mouth and you're breathing shallow, you have reduced recruitment of the diaphragm and you're not getting that same connection with the throat. In other words, the throat here to keep open the upper airway. So as I said a couple of times already, waking up with a dry mouth in the morning is a sign of mouth breathing. I'm going to show you this exercise. This exercise is very simple in terms of helping you decongest the nose. It involves holding the breath. I'm going to go very, very gentle with it. If you're pregnant, don't do the exercise. If you have panic disorder or any serious medical conditions, you have to go very, very gentle. So let's start opening up your nose. Those of you with a stuffy nose, with rhinitis, with hay fever, you don't just have a stuffy nose, you're also more likely to have poor sleep. And people also with nasal obstruction, you are 2 to 3 times more likely to have a sleep problem. It often starts with the nose. Okay, so to decongest the nose, what I would like you to do is take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold your nose, and just gently nod your head up and down, holding your breath, 5 head nods. So let's start off with 5 head nods and then let go, but breathe in through your nose. And I know it sounds a little bit, or it looks a little bit strange, but the exercise, this was one exercise that got me into breathing, and the next one was the breathe light, which got me into breathing. I always had a stuffy nose, and you have to practice this a few times. It helps to decongest the nose. So let's wait about 30 seconds and we're going to do it again. If you feel comfortable doing 10 head nods, let's do 10 head nods. So whenever you're ready, take a normal breath in through your nose, out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold your nose, and just gently nod your head up and down as you're holding your breath. And it is a little bit of a stressor. And the key is do about 10 head nods, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go, breathe in through your nose, and just breathe normally now in and out through the nose. So the whole emphasis of that exercise is not to overdo it. You want to push yourself a little bit because it's the slight stress as a result of the breath holding that's likely helping to open up the nose. Now, we know it works pretty good for nasal congestion on the basis that we've had tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people actually practice it, more even, because it's been written in the books that I've been writing since 2003, YouTube videos and other aspects as well, yeah. So I'm going to wait about 30 seconds. We're going to do it again. And if you have a head cold, if you have a stuffy nose, and you can also teach this exercise to children. So whenever you're ready, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold your nose, and just gently nod your head up and down, holding your breath. So the key is to gently hold your breath, nod your head up and down, and maybe do it for 10 head nods or 12 head nods, not to overdo it. You should be able to recover pretty quickly. Then to let go, but to breathe in and out through your nose. So you might start noticing that your nose is helping to open up. It just feels a little bit easier to breathe through, and this is the key. This is absolutely the key. And the reason being is because if we have a stuffy nose, we automatically switch to mouth breathing. And the reason, if we have a stuffy nose, we feel that we're not getting enough air through our nose, and we don't even think about it. We just breathe through our mouth instead. But nose breathing is where it's at. There is nothing inside your mouth that does anything for your breathing. If you think about what's inside your mouth, your teeth, your hard palate, your soft palate, your tongue, your gums, saliva, none of those things do anything for your breathing. Your teeth doesn't do anything for the breath. The tongue doesn't do anything for your breathing. Your hard palate, your soft palate, the back of the mouth doesn't do anything for the breath. So your mouth is an emergency. And yet 50% of adults breathe through an open mouth during sleep. 50%. So it's so, so common. Now, the key with nasal breathing is never force it. Start breathing through your nose during the day. You have to condition and make the transition from mouth to nose breathing. But even as you go for a walk, breathe in and out through your nose. Don't have your mouth open. If, for example, while you're walking, the air hunger is a bit stronger and you're feeling a little bit more breathless, simply slow down the pace of your walk or any physical exercise that you're doing. Now, ironically, when you're breathing through your nose during physical exercise, it's also healthier. And the reason being is because when you breathe through your nose during exercise, there's a slight accumulation of a gas called carbon dioxide in your lungs and blood. And when carbon dioxide accumulates a little in your lungs and blood, it improves blood flow to your heart. It also improves blood flow to your brain. So when you do your physical exercise with your mouth closed, you will have increased blood circulation and increased oxygen delivery. You're doing physical exercise, and it's also important to make sure that your heart is getting adequate oxygen. Now, I did a podcast with Dr. George Dallam. He has written a paper on nasal breathing during physical exercise. He looked at endurance athletes. He looked at the fact that it's very common that they have fibrosing of the heart muscle, that they can have arrhythmia of the heart. And he was saying that nasal breathing can protect the athlete's heart by doing physical exercise with the mouth closed. But even for your sleep, start off with nasal breathing during wakefulness. Yeah. And even if you're feeling the air hunger is a little bit too much for you, that's not a deprivation of oxygen that's generating that sensation of air hunger as you do physical exercise. That's an accumulation of carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is a gas that you produce inside your body, and it's carbon dioxide that is the primary driver of your breathing. So that's the nose unblocking exercise. You can practice that 5 or 6 times whenever your nose feels a little bit stuffy, and the more you breathe through your nose, the better your nose works. Now, of course, you might be thinking, how do we get the mouth closed during sleep? Mouth taping has gone viral. Is that good? I think it is. I think it's great in terms of the awareness that's out there. Getting the mouth closed during sleep. There's a lot of teenagers, TikTokers, and different influencers all talking about nasal breathing during sleep. It's a lot better than it was 23 years ago when I started talking about it and taping my mouth. I started taping my mouth back in 1998. Genuinely, it was the best thing that I had ever done in terms of sleep and concentration and focus, but also, of course, mood, because we can't be in a good state of mind if our sleep quality is not good. Now, MyoTape is my own tape. It's a tape that I developed especially for children, but now, of course, it's popular with adults as well. It's a safe tape. And the reason that it's a safe tape is because it doesn't cover the mouth. Covering the mouth is not particularly helpful, especially with people with obstructive sleep apnea. And the reason there is because it can make sleep apnea worse. Also, covering the mouth is not suitable for children. It's not suitable for teenagers. It's not suitable for people with anxiety or panic disorder. Or there is a risk that if you cover the mouth and you tape your mouth closed, what happens if you have to open your mouth in an emergency? It's a problem. So MyoTape is specifically designed. There's an elasticated tension, so it's worn around the mouth, and there's an elasticated tension pulling the lips together so that you have safe nasal breathing during sleep. It can also be used with a CPAP, so continuous positive airway pressure, or a mandibular advancement device. So this is the only slides. It's going to be a little bit technical. It's really important never to tape your mouth by covering the mouth. I'm not just saying that because I'm the creator of MyoTape, but this is a study that was published back in 2022. They looked at individuals with established obstructive sleep apnea. So you see the AHI here, and mild will be 5 to 15 events per hour. Moderate is 15 to 30, and severe is 30 events plus. So this is their baseline readings. And then they wore adhesive mouth tape. You can see that individuals who wore adhesive mouth tape, some of them made progress, but some of them got worse. And this adhesive mouth tape was covering their mouths altogether. So you see this person here, their AHI dropped. They got a little bit better. This person here, significantly better, but this person here got worse. This person here, a little bit better, but this person here got worse. This person here was almost cured. This person here got worse. This person here got worse. This person here got better. This is about the same. This person got better, but these persons got worse. So you can see that the results are mixed enough if you use a tape that covers your mouth. especially if you have a risk of sleep apnea. Now, it's common enough to have sleep apnea and not know it. 85% of people with sleep apnea are undiagnosed. So only 15% are diagnosed. There's other stats with obstructive sleep apnea that are quite interesting. So of the 15% of people who are diagnosed, only 40% take up treatment. And of the 40% that take up treatment using CPAP, 50% abandon it after about 3 to 6 months. So if you have 100 people with sleep apnea in a village, only 3 of them or 4 of them will be treated. Now, that's a far cry from a success, but that is the model of sleep apnea at the moment. And 936 million people are reported to have obstructive sleep apnea, and that's according to a Lancet paper that was published in 2017. So we were talking about having to open up the airway, and it's very important that 3/4 of your tongue is resting on the roof of the mouth. Now, it's important that you have your mouth closed, of course, during the day, and you have your tongue resting on the roof of the mouth during the day. And when you wake up in the morning, check to see where is your tongue, because your tongue is going to be either in two places. It's either in the roof of the mouth, and that's important because it's going to help pull the tongue out of the airway, or it's in the airway. So we always want to make sure the tongue is resting in the roof of the mouth. I would like you to practice this. It's just simple tongue pops because it'll give you an idea of where your tongue should be. So if you can make this sound. So in order to make that sound, you're pressing your tongue up against the roof of the mouth, you're creating a suction, and then you're pulling your tongue down, and that's making the sound. So your tongue should be where you're putting your tongue to make that sound. So you're pressing your tongue against the palate, and 3/4 of the tongue pressed against the roof of the mouth, but not necessarily touching the top front teeth. So you don't want your tongue touching the top front teeth. You just want the tongue just a little back behind the top front teeth, but 3/4 of the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth. And that's very important for airway. Does anybody remember the size of a good airway? So when we're talking about the airway, we're talking about this here. We're talking about the space at the back of the mouth. We're talking about the throat itself. Does anybody remember what's the size of a good airway? It's the size of your tongue. We don't have too much room for air there, so you don't want your tongue falling back into that space, because if it narrows the airway, it increases resistance to breathing. If you're here because of your children, it's very important too to teach your children simple breathing exercise to help decongest the nose. The key with children is that young children aged between 3 and 7 or 8 years of age, they may have enlarged adenoids. So practice the nose unblocking exercise 5 or 6 times, and then just check, can the child breathe comfortably through their nose for 3 minutes? That's very, very important. And then what you can do is ask them, can they walk with their mouth closed for 3 minutes? Now, all of the breathing exercise for children are available from the website myotape.com. I recorded these videos a few years ago with my own daughter. She was about 9 years of age at the time, and we went through all of the breathing exercise for children. They're completely free of charge. Sit your child down, bring your child through the breathing practice, and always bear in mind, it's never about forcing nasal breathing with children. It's always about helping to decongest the nose and seeing that the child can comfortably breathe through their nose. Always start off with nasal breathing during the day, and even wearing myotape as a habit changer during the day. So for example, this child here is reading a book. She's wearing a piece of tape around the mouth, pulling the lips together. And if, for example, she forgets to breathe through her nose, what will happen is that as soon as she opens her mouth, the tape will exert an elastic tension on her mouth to bring her lips together, and that will remind her to continue breathing in and out through the nose. Now, if, for example, your child, after you do the nose unblocking exercise a few times, that your child is still feeling very uncomfortable breathing through their nose, they may have enlarged adenoids, and only an ear, nose, and throat doctor will be able to identify that. Women's sleep is very much different to men's sleep, and then the entire sleep industry has, in a way, it has evolved around men. Obstructive sleep apnea affects more men, snoring affects more men, but insomnia affects more women, and another condition, upper airway resistance syndrome, which affects more women. The thing about upper airway resistance syndrome is that it's under the radar. You go and do a sleep study, you come out in the morning, the sleep doctor has your results, and the sleep doctor is likely to say, well, you're not too bad. Your blood oxygen saturation didn't drop at all during the night, and you didn't have any apneas. And of course, so you're thinking to yourself, well, my doctor is saying that I'm okay, but I know I'm not okay, because the symptoms often associated with upper airway resistance syndrome can be anxiety, panic disorder, fibromyalgia. So even these symptoms are different with females to men, to the point that Dr. Christian Guilleminault, and he is the founding father of sleep medicine, he referred to women as the forgotten gender when it comes to sleep medicine. So if you do have anxiety or panic disorder or fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, it's really important. Could you have upper airway resistance syndrome? Now, the traditional treatment for upper airway resistance syndrome is a CPAP machine or a mandibular advancement device. However, if you were to improve your breathing patterns, could you help open up the airway? Could you reduce the resistance to your breathing during sleep? So what is upper airway resistance syndrome? The female has a narrower airway. She may have a high narrow palate. She might have had teeth extracted in orthodontics. So her airway is narrower. And because of the narrower airway, it takes more effort for her to breathe. And because it takes more effort for her to breathe during sleep, this is what's arousing her from sleep. So she continuously gets disrupted in terms of being pulled out of deep sleep into lighter sleep. She may not wake up. Sometimes it can be common. If, for example, the female wakes up quite easily, she has what's called low arousal threshold, which can be common with upper airway resistance syndrome. But, she may not necessarily wake up, but still waking up feeling unrefreshed. And the other thing about sleep apnea in females, if the female has a sleep apnea and has between 2 and 5 events per hour, it's equivalent to a man having 10 to 15 events per hour. So any impedance or restriction or resistance to breathing in sleep in females, it has a much stronger effect than it has on men for some reason. But the sleep industry has been focused very much around men. So that's why, again, Dr. Christian Guilleminault referring to women as the forgotten gender in sleep. Diaphragmatic breathing is very, very important because of the connection between the diaphragm and the upper airway dilator muscles. It helps to stiffen the throat, and also because of the connection between the diaphragm and stimulating the vagus nerve to help bring balance to the body and mind. And that is very important with insomnia. So I'm going to do some practice in terms of helping to improve everyday breathing patterns and also to bring balance to the autonomic nervous system. If we have poor sleep, we're likely to be in an increased stress response because that's what poor sleep does. So whether it's insomnia or snoring or obstructive sleep apnea or upper airway resistance syndrome, it puts us into an increased stress response. But what we want to do is we want to dampen the stress response and we want to increase the relaxation response because this is when rest and digest and repair happens. We can use breathing to help bring balance to the autonomic nervous system, but we can also use breathing to help improve sleep quality, to help bring balance to the autonomic nervous system. So if any of you are tracking yourself in terms of heart rate variability, always consider it's not just how you breathe during the day, it's also how do you breathe during sleep. I'm going to start off with breathe light. This is a really, really important exercise. This exercise will help you improve blood flow. It will help improve oxygen delivery. To help stimulate the vagus nerve. It helps to induce relaxation. It might make you a bit sleepy because, of course, this is often what we want to do before sleep. And I'm going to do a couple of sessions of this. So what I would like you to do is to put one hand on your chest and one hand just above your navel. So one hand on your chest and one hand just above your navel. And I would like you to take your attention out of your mind and onto your breath. So just for the first minute or so, are you able to follow the airflow as it comes in and out of your nose? Can you feel the slightly colder air coming into your nose? And can you feel the slightly warmer air as it leaves your nose? So bring your attention from your mind and onto your breathing. Can you feel the slightly colder air coming into your nose? And can you feel the slightly warmer air as it leaves your nose? Ironically, to improve blood circulation, it's not about taking big, full breaths. It's about doing the opposite. So with this exercise, I'm going to have you soften your breathing and breathe a little bit less air. You're going to feel that you're not getting enough air. The sensation that you're not getting enough air tells you that carbon dioxide is accumulated a little in your lungs and blood. And as carbon dioxide accumulates in the body, it helps to improve your blood circulation. It's very common with people with poor breathing to have cold hands and cold feet. When you start breathing a little bit less air, you can help improve your blood circulation. But what we're doing this for is to change your breathing patterns so that your breathing is lighter during sleep. So you're paying attention to the airflow coming into your nose and the airflow as it's leaving your nose. And what I would like you to do now is to gently soften and to slow down your breathing. So to take a very, very soft, gentle breath of air coming into your nose. So as you're breathing in, can you slow down the speed of the air coming into your nose, almost that your breath in is imperceptible, almost that you are hardly breathing in at all. So you're taking a very, very soft and gentle breath in through your nose, and then as you breathe out, can you bring a total feeling of relaxation to the body and have a really slow and relaxed and a gentle breath out. This breathing is the opposite to how you would breathe during stress. Remember, poor sleep puts us into a stress response. We're not breathing faster and harder, we're breathing lighter and we're breathing slower. So again, I would like you to take a very, very soft and slow, gentle breath of air coming into your nose. Can you breathe so softly, almost that the breath in is imperceptible, that you hardly feel any air coming into your nostrils, that there's hardly any turbulence of air as it comes into your nose, and then at the top of the breath, bring a total feeling of relaxation to the body and allow a slow and relaxed and a gentle breath out. So you're really slowing down and softening the speed of your breathing to the point that you're breathing less air into your body. So you're doing it correctly if you have about 30% less movement of your breathing, to take 30% less air into the body. Not to hold your breath, not to freeze your breathing, just gently soften your breath to the point that you have air hunger. You don't want to have air hunger that's too much either. So if you're feeling tense, take a rest from the exercise for a few seconds and then come back to it. If you have involuntary contractions of the diaphragm, or if you're losing control over your breathing, take a rest from the exercise and then come back to it. But this exercise is really important for insomnia, upper airway resistance syndrome, snoring, and obstructive sleep apnea. And again, you're taking a really soft and slow, gentle breath coming into your nose. At the top of the breath, you bring a total feeling of relaxation to the body, and you have a relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. I would like you to soften your breathing to the point that you feel that you're not getting enough air. I would like you to feel the same way as if you're going for a walk. You're feeling slightly breathless. So how do you do it? Take less air into your body. How do you take less air into your body? Slow down the speed of the air coming into your nose, or you could take a shorter breath in. So you're taking a softer or a shorter breath of air into your nose, and then you're having a really relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. So the whole purpose of this exercise is to breathe less air, to expose yourself to increased carbon dioxide, to help to reduce the sensitivity of the body to carbon dioxide. Because if you have a strong sensitivity to the gas carbon dioxide, your driver to breathe is quite fast and strong. And fast and strong breathing is going to increase turbulence in the airways during sleep, increases resistance to your breathing. Take a rest, take a rest. So in terms of that exercise, for some of you who are new to breathing, it might seem a little bit strange. You're breathing less air. That got me into breathing. 2 exercises got me into breathing back 25 years ago. One was the nose unblocking exercise because it worked. The second one was that one. I started breathing less air, under breathing to the point of air hunger. Yeah, it's a bit uncomfortable, but the temperature of my hands increased. I'm interested just in terms of chat. Has this had any effect on you? Check in on the saliva in the mouth. Is the saliva in your mouth, is it the same as before the exercise? Did it increase during the exercise, or did your mouth go drier? And also check in terms of if you're feeling the same or if you're sleepier. Check in with your circulation, your hands. Are they colder? Are they warmer? Are they the same? Because that can be interesting. Like, how is your body responding to when you breathe less air? How is your body responding to when you breathe less air? Now, if you've got increased saliva in your mouth, your body has activated the digest response. Your body is ready for the digestion of food. If you're feeling sleepy, feeling a little bit dozy, you're activating the rest response. So if we think of the two branches of the autonomic nervous system, we have the sympathetic nervous system, which is considered to be the fight or flight response. This is when we're in trouble. And sympathetic, the word sympathetic means that all resources are coming to help you. You're in trouble, you're in this increased stress response, and your body is monitoring, your body is bringing together all of your resources to help you in that situation. But the problem with increased stress, we can't cope with that long term. We are not built for long-term stress. We're well able to cope with short-term stress. How can you tell the brain that you're safe? Because you have to consider it this way. Our brain is here to protect us, and the brain is not going to allow us to fall asleep if it considers that the body is under threat. And the body is under threat if we're breathing faster and harder and upper chest, because you have that information going to the brain. Okay, but that isn't just about insomnia. That's also about helping with snoring and sleep apnea. So let's go again. What I would like you to do is put one hand on your chest, one hand just above your navel, and bring your attention to your breathing. So you're paying attention to the slightly colder air coming into your nose and your slightly warmer air as it's leaving your nose. And what I would like you to do is really start softening and slowing down your breathing to the point that you feel that you're not getting enough air. The purpose of this is to breathe less air. By breathing less air, carbon dioxide increases a little in your lungs and blood. And ironically, as carbon dioxide increases, it improves blood flow throughout the body, including the brain. With this exercise here, you can expect, if you have a tolerable air hunger, that there can be an increase of blood flow to the brain by between 5 and 10%. You don't increase blood flow to the brain if you take full deep breaths that are commonly told. It's not about taking full deep breaths. Carbon dioxide is a vasodilator. Carbon dioxide is one of the primary influences in terms of increasing blood flow to the brain. And your brain is very hungry for oxygen. It consumes 20% of oxygen. So we can directly influence blood flow to the brain, and we have to consider what are the implications of that in terms of brain health. So you have one hand on your chest, you have one hand just above your navel. You're bringing your attention out of your mind and onto your breathing. You're really slowing down the speed of the air as it comes into your nose, and even slowing down the speed of the air coming into your nose almost at your breath is imperceptible. So can you really slow down the speed of the air coming into your nose to the point that you hardly feel any air coming into your nostrils? Your breathing is so soft, so calm, so quiet. And as you breathe out, bring a total feeling of relaxation to the body and allow the air to leave the body effortlessly. So you're really softening and slowing down the speed of your breathing to the point that you feel air hunger. And always remember, that sensation of air hunger is not a deprivation of oxygen. On the contrary, the sensation of air hunger indicates there's an increase of carbon dioxide, which in turn is improving your blood circulation and oxygen delivery throughout the body. But why would we do this for sleep? It's because we want to train your breathing patterns during the day so that when you're asleep, your breathing is lighter and your breathing is slower. We don't want fast, hard, turbulent breathing during sleep. We want light, slow breathing during sleep. When there's light, slow breathing during sleep, there's less effort involved with breathing. So to continue again, you're taking a really soft and a slow and a gentle breath of air coming into your nose, slowing down the speed of the air. You could say almost that the fine hairs within the nostrils do not move. And as you breathe out, bring a total feeling of relaxation to the body. So you're really slowing down the speed of the air as it leaves the body. And your objective is that you feel that you're not getting enough air. Now, for example, if the air hunger is a little bit too much for you and you're feeling stressed just to take a rest, air hunger can be a small bit uncomfortable. The objective is that it's to induce relaxation. But if you feel that the air hunger is just a little bit too much for you, just take a rest. So bear in mind, we want to get a state of air hunger that's not too little, not too much, but just right. If you're feeling tense, the air hunger has gone a little bit too much. If you have involuntary contractions of the diaphragm, the air hunger has gone a little bit too much. If you're feeling panicked or your increased heart rate, your air hunger is too much. But if you have a sensation of air hunger, that you're just gently softening and slowing down your breathing, and it's the same feeling of breathlessness that you would have as if you're going for a walk, then you're in the right spot. If your body is conveying that you have increased watery saliva in the mouth, that's positive. If you're feeling sleepy, that's positive, because the very light and slow breathing is inducing relaxation. And the slight increase of carbon dioxide, which is causing air hunger, is also inducing relaxation. So it's about softening and slowing down the speed of the breath to convey to the brain that you're safe. Very important for insomnia, very important for falling asleep, but of course, very important for sleep overall. Now, what do I mean by relaxation? So, the exhalation, when you're having a breath out, the speed of your breath out, it should be about 1.5 to 2 times the length of the breath in. So, during inspiration, when you're taking a breath of air into your body, it's ideal if you have a soft, gentle inspiration. It's in and out through the nose and it's silent. So you're taking a very, very soft and slow, gentle breath into your nose. And then on the breath out, bring a feeling of relaxation to the body, if you can, and allow the air to leave the body effortlessly. Or what you can do is take a soft, gentle breath of air into your nose, and at the top of the breath, just really encourage a slow, relaxed, and a gentle exhalation. And by the way, doing this is also very good when you're feeling stressed. When you're feeling stressed, the objective is not to hyperventilate. The strange thing about the human being, when we get into a difficult situation and we're feeling intimidated or we're feeling stressed or we're feeling there's a threat, we often react with faster, harder upper chest breathing. We're telling the brain that there's a threat. The brain is putting us into a fight or flight response, and all the brain wants to do is get us out of the situation. You can't think straight. So here you have a difficult situation that you need to solve. But because our body has reacted with faster, harder, and upper chest breathing, we're not able to think straight. We're not able to reason. We're not able to make a decision. So decision making is affected. So it's very important to have control over your breathing in a difficult situation as well. And the reason I talk about that is not just because of the difficult situation, it's also because of your sleep. So whenever you have a difficult situation, it's really important not to hyperventilate. Bring your attention onto the breath and bring a softness and a calmness to the breath. In other words, not to breathe fast and shallow and mouth and upper chest. Because if you breathe that way, you're not going to solve the situation so readily. People who are in school, doing exams, getting stressed, and of course, that's not going to help performance. People in the corporate world getting stressed, it's not going to help performance. People in the sporting world. So we have a tool to be able to self-regulate. And of course, when we talk about recovery, we have to include sleep. Okay. We're just taking a rest for about a minute or so, and then I'm going to come back to that exercise again. So my focus here today is really about sleep. It's really, really about sleep. Breathing is the foundation to improving sleep, but sleep is a foundation for health. Sleep is a foundation. It's huge, absolutely huge. You know this anyway. You know, you don't need me to tell it that to you. I was in school, problems with concentration, constantly stuck in my head. We also have increased rumination of the mind when our sleep quality is poor. So when people talk about overthinking, one of the ingredients that may be causing overthinking is poor sleep. The mind doesn't switch off. And the problem with this is that when the mind doesn't switch off, it also affects our sleep. Because if we can't switch the mind off when we go to bed, well, then we're not likely to fall asleep so readily because we're overthinking. And then if we wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, we can be overthinking. So this is more than just quietening the mind. But I suppose I totally agree with Giuseppe. It is quietening the mind, but how do we quieten the mind? There's a few aspects to it. If we have better sleep, we help quieten the mind. But if we have better breathing, we help quieten the mind. It's not just about directing our attention from the mind and onto the breath. That's not enough. It's about breathing in and out through the nose. And it's about telling the brain that we are safe. I'm so interested if you put it into chat. How many of you feel that when you wake up during the middle of the night, that your mind has a tendency to overthink? So in terms of, and I think it can be a very challenging time. You wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. There's a pressure on you to fall back asleep. You're putting a pressure to fall back asleep. And of course, that will hamper the very thing that we're looking to achieve. So does it make sense? And we have to bear in mind, like 8.4% of the US population taking sleeping pills. And what's the purpose of a sleeping pill? It's to calm everything down. Well, can we calm ourselves down through breathing? Not just paying attention to the breath, but breathing in the right way, that we're helping to induce relaxation. How do we help to induce relaxation? We breathe light, we breathe slow, we breathe deep, LSD. So light is about under breathing. Light is about really softening and slowing down your breath so that you breathe less air to gently increase carbon dioxide in the lungs and in the blood. Slow. Slow is about slowing down the respiratory rate to breathe a bit slower than what you are ordinarily breathing. Deep is about breathing with good recruitment of the diaphragm because of the connection with the diaphragm and the upper airway dilator muscles. So let's go again. I'd like you to practice again the breathe light, and this way I'm going to give you a different variation of it. I would like you to put your finger underneath your nose as follows. And this is just to pay attention to the airflow coming from your nose onto your finger. So you have your finger underneath your nose, and I would like you to breathe the same way as before. You're taking a soft and slow, gentle breath coming into your nose, and to really have a slow and relaxed and a gentle breath out. So you're taking, as you breathe in, you're slowing down the speed of the air as it comes into your nostrils. And as you breathe out, can you really slow down the speed of the air so that you feel hardly any air coming onto your finger? So you're taking a really soft and a slow and a gentle breath in, and you're having a relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. So the whole objective here is that you have your finger underneath your nose. You're taking a soft breath of air into your nose. And as you breathe out, can you breathe out so softly onto your finger that you feel hardly any air coming onto your finger? So it's a soft, gentle breath of air coming into your nose. And it's a relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. And don't worry about getting it perfect. Can you gently soften and slow down the speed of your breathing so that you feel less airflow onto your finger? If your finger was a feather, could you breathe so lightly that the feather doesn't move? Or you might have heard of opera singers back in the day, that an opera singer would be trained with a candle flame about 8 inches from their face. And their objective was to sing without blowing out the candle flame. So it's all about conservation of the breath. So with this breathing exercise here, you're taking a really soft and slow, gentle breath of air into your nose. And you're allowing a relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. So as you're breathing onto your finger, can you slow down the speed of the air coming onto your finger? And the more warm air you feel on your finger, the harder you are breathing. So your objective is, can you bring onto your finger so slowly, you're breathing onto your finger so slowly that if your finger was a feather, the feather would hardly move. So you're doing this exercise correctly when you feel air hunger. Air hunger tells you that carbon dioxide has increased a little in your lungs and blood. Carbon dioxide isn't just a waste gas. Our objective is to expose you to increased carbon dioxide to reduce your sensitivity to carbon dioxide. Because if you have a strong sensitivity to carbon dioxide, your breathing is going to be a bit faster, a bit harder, and it can also drive your breathing into the upper chest. And that in turn then feeds into resistance to breathing during sleep. It's not just about your airway, but it's also about the autonomic nervous system, and it's about how fast and hard do you breathe during sleep. Okay, take a rest. Okay, so earlier on, you'll remember that I spoke about mouth snoring, and I made the sound of a snore through the mouth like this. And then I asked you to close your mouth and try and snore through your mouth with your mouth closed. So once your mouth is closed, mouth snoring is pretty much impossible, because in order to snore through the mouth, you're breathing through the mouth. So if you breathe through your nose during sleep exclusively, you're not going to be snoring through the mouth. The second form of snoring that we look at is nasal snoring, and I made the sound like this. Can you make that sound there? So can you make the sound of a nasal snore? And just check in, what do you do or what do you have to do to make that sound? And now what I would like you to do is to breathe light and try and make the sound of a snore through your nose. So now what I would like you to do is you're taking a very, very soft and slow, gentle breath in through your nose, and a really relaxed and slow, gentle breath out through your nose. And try and snore through your nose when your breathing is lighter. So this is important because, of course, when we think about snoring and sleep issues, it's not just about the size of the airway, it's also about what are we expected to get through it. And if we have a faster and harder breathing pattern, there's going to be increased resistance. So that's why we're practicing breathe light, to train the brain that light breathing becomes our normal everyday breathing pattern. Slow breathing becomes our normal everyday breathing pattern, because some of us have a heightened sensitivity to carbon dioxide and we have a stronger drive to breathe. And our objective is to help reduce the sensitivity to carbon dioxide. Now, you might ask, well, what's the implications of this or relevance? So I'm going to pull up a paper that was written recently enough by a Harvard sleep doctor called Messino, and he looked at breath hold time in sleep apnea. So his conclusion was, so breath holding is a means to estimate what's called loop gain contribution to obstructive sleep apnea. 30% of people with obstructive sleep apnea have high loop gain, and you can identify high loop gain if you have a reduced breath hold duration. So the meaning of this is that if you have a low breath hold time, it implies that you've got a strong chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide. And if you stop breathing during sleep because of collapse of the upper airways and there's an accumulation of carbon dioxide, it means when you resume breathing, you're going to resume breathing with exaggerated ventilation. So, but the exaggerated ventilation is going to feed into the next apnea. So I'll kind of do a demonstration. So you might be listening to a partner, say for example, and the partner is snoring. And then they stop breathing. Does that make sense? So they stop breathing for a short period of time. Carbon dioxide accumulated during that time. And when they resume breathing, it was with such exaggerated ventilation. And this then is feeding into the next apneas. So you can see the implications of that. Now, there's plenty of papers looking at the autonomic nervous system and slow breathing. So I'm going to go again with light breathing. And even if you just take one thing out of this today, a simple breathing practice to convey to the brain that you're safe, to activate the body's relaxation response and dampen the stress response. Because when we think of the autonomic nervous system, it's like a seesaw. And ideally, we have it in balance, a balance between the rest and digest response and the stress response. If one goes down, the other goes up. And it can happen either way. And you don't want to be tipped in an increased stress response. So what we want to do is we want to increase the relaxation and dampen the stress. And one way to do that is through your breath. And it's not about taking the full big breaths. It's not about breathing faster. It's not about breathing harder, but it's about breathing nose, light, slow, and low. Let's go again. So this time I'm going to have you put one hand on your chest and one hand just above your navel. You're tuning into your breathing. And this also is a very good thing to do, because when you have your attention on the breath, you're giving your mind a little bit of space. So many of you said earlier on, in the chat, you were saying that, yes, you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and it's very difficult to switch off the mind. How can we train the brain that we don't have so much thought activity? So this can be one way to do it. You have your attention on your breathing. It's normal that your mind wanders off, but every time your mind wanders, bring your attention back onto the breath. And every time you bring your attention back onto your breathing, you're helping to train the brain to hold attention on the breath. And this will help you to get out of your head. So in other words, that you're not going to be stuck in your head thinking, and especially the unproductive and often, the habit of overthinking that's not necessarily helpful. It's just a habit. And that can be a habit that can keep us awake at night, of course. So you have your attention on your breathing. If the mind wanders off, bring your attention back onto the breath. And I would like you to take a really soft and slow, gentle breath of air coming into your nose, and then a relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. So just gently bring a feeling of relaxation to the body. You're taking a soft and slow, gentle breath of air coming into your nose. And then on the breath out, can you allow a really slow and relaxed and a gentle breath out? The whole objective here is to breathe less air. To breathe less air to the point you have air hunger. But to have air hunger that you feel tolerable. Not too little, not too much, but just right. If the air hunger gets a bit too much for you, take a little rest and then come back to it. If the air hunger is too little, reduce your breathing volume a little bit so that you have just right air hunger. So when you're breathing a little bit less air, and I would like you to breathe about 30% less air, the gas carbon dioxide produced in your body can't leave the body quickly enough. It increases in your lungs and it increases in the blood, and carbon dioxide helps to stimulate the vagus nerve. So that nerve is responsible for inducing relaxation. And this may be why you're more likely to have increased watery saliva in the mouth. So even though you're feeling that you're not getting enough air, your body can respond very positively to it. You're activating the digest response. You're feeling sleepy, you're activating the rest response. A little tool that you could practice for 10 minutes before you go to sleep. Your brain is not going to allow you to fall asleep easy if your brain feels that the body is under threat. So again, taking a very, very soft and slow, gentle breath of air coming into your nose, and a really relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. Softening and slowing down the speed of your breathing to the point that you feel that you're not getting enough air. And keep gently working with that. I haven't focused on the diaphragm yet at the moment, but I will focus. And one way to help improve diaphragmatic breathing is simply breathe in and out through your nose. It is not good that if, for example, you're breathing in and out through the mouth, that's only going to drive your breathing upper chest, faster breathing, harder breathing, increased stress. So again, you're telling the brain that you're safe. Really important to help counter the stresses of our everyday lives, because very often it's the stress of our everyday life that's going to be impacting our sleep. You're taking a very, very soft and slow, gentle breath of air coming into your nose, and at the top of the breath, bring a total feeling of relaxation to the body and allow a slow and relaxed and a gentle breath out. So continue gently slowing down the speed of your breathing. If your mind wanders off, bring your attention back. Every time that you bring your attention back, you're helping to develop your capacity to hold attention. You're helping to develop your capacity to bring a quietness to the mind. And this doesn't just help to reduce overthinking, but you're also developing your capacity to concentrate, to improve your attention span, because the two of them go hand in hand. If overthinking increases, concentration decreases. What we want to do is we want to reduce overthinking. Reduce overthinking so we develop the capacity to hold attention on what we want to hold it upon. And that's the essence of being human. Not to live our life stuck in our head, going from one thought to the other and thinking that it's absolutely no relevance to what we're doing. And so often we are doing one thing, but we are thinking about something else. If we are doing one thing, it's good to have our attention on that one thing. Right now, we are practicing a breathing technique. I would like you to have all of your attention on the doing. When the mind wanders, you bring your attention back. Okay, take a rest. Take a rest. So I will be coming to questions in about, say, 10 minutes. So I'll kind of leave about 30 or 40 minutes for questions. I'm not sure if I already explained this one, but what I would like you to do is we're going to do it again. Look down at your chest and take the breath through your mouth. Now, typically you will see that when you breathe through an open mouth, you're breathing, engaging more of the upper chest. That's not helpful for the diaphragm breathing muscle. And your diaphragm breathing muscle is the main breathing muscle, which is located just at the base of your ribs. Your diaphragm breathing muscle is connected with the upper airway dilator muscles. Now, if you breathe through your nose, you will typically have a better recruitment of the diaphragm. And the thing about nose breathing, it's not just nose breathing during sleep. So it's just because Wendy just put it in a comment there, my diaphragm is weak. How do you help to improve the recruitment and the strength of the diaphragm? Breathe in and out through your nose, especially when you do physical exercise. Because when you breathe through your nose during physical exercise, you're helping to add an extra load onto the diaphragm. You're adding resistance to your breathing by breathing through your nose during physical exercise, and this can help to improve the function and the strength of the diaphragm. And that's going to be very important as well, not just for your sleep. Your diaphragm breathing muscle isn't just for respiration or sleep, but it's also providing stabilization of the spine. 50% of people with lower back pain have poor breathing from a biomechanical point of view. Is it the lower back pain which is driving breathing into the upper chest, or is it upper chest breathing and reduced recruitment of the diaphragm which is feeding into lower back pain? So there's always kind of things that are happening outside of it. And even though our focus today is on sleep, there's other connections there that you might not necessarily have put that connection to. But yes, it does take practice. Now what I would like you to do is I would like you to have your hands either side of your lower ribs. So for example, is to locate the lower ribs. So your lower ribs, so you have your ribs here, the lower ribs, and your diaphragm is just separating your chest from your abdomen. So I would like you to have your hands either side of your lower ribs. And as you breathe in, can you gently guide your hands outwards? So it's not necessarily about having your hands in your front, but having your hands more at your sides. And as you breathe in, can you gently guide your ribs outwards? And as you breathe out, do you feel your ribs gently moving in? As you breathe in, do you feel your ribs gently moving out? And as you breathe out, do you feel your ribs gently moving in? And just to continue with that, so it's not about pushing and pulling. All you're doing is just gently guiding it. As you breathe in, can you feel your lower ribs just gently moving out? As you breathe out, can you feel your lower ribs just gently moving in? And now what I would like you to do is, I'm going to time your breathing. I'm going to breathe in for 3 seconds and out for 5 seconds. I think most of you will be able to do it. It won't be too much for you. And that would be simply breathing in, 2, 3. But the only guideline is it should be in and out through your nose and it should be silent. So it's not that I want you to take full breaths. No. All I would like you to do is to have slow breathing with good recruitment of the diaphragm. And as you breathe in, you're feeling your ribs gently moving out. And as you breathe out, you're feeling your ribs gently moving in. So you're breathing in, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 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 in, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, take a rest at that. So the connection with the diaphragm is quite interesting when it comes to sleep. And I had come across it in a paper that was published in The Lancet back in 2014. And it was when I was doing research for a review article that I was writing. So this was the paper here. It was written by a number of individuals who are quite well known in sleep, especially Professor Malhotra. And when I scrolled down through the paper, he talked about lung volume. The only reason I'm showing you the science, I think it's important. So lung volume can be a causative factor. And so the airway is smaller and collapses more easily when lung volume is small. So this is when we're breathing more in the upper chest. This relation probably exists because the lower and the upper airways are mechanically linked. So with increased lung volumes, the structures are pulled, resulting in stiffening and dilation of the pharyngeal airway. Now, it's really, really important that we have stiffening and dilation of the throat. We don't want the throat collapsing easily. And how can we help to maintain the throat more open? And this is coming into effect with upper airway resistance syndrome and also with sleep apnea. So we said there's two main things. One is the narrowing of the airway. So our objective is how can we get that airway as wide as possible? One, mouth should be closed because that helps to bring the lower jaw forward. Two, tongue is resting up in the roof of the mouth, which in turn is helping to bring the tongue out of the throat. Three, the recruitment of the diaphragm and the connection between the diaphragm and the stiffening and dilation of the throat. Four, losing some weight. Now, it's not always easy with sleep problems, and the problem with poor sleep quality is that it stimulates our appetite, and it often stimulates us to eat the wrong sort of food. So there can be a slight, work involved there. But what I would say to you is just be conscious of it. That because the thing about putting on weight is that it puts increased fat pads onto the throat. It puts more fat onto the tongue. The tongue gets bigger in the mouth, which is occupying more space. The throat is narrower because of the increased fat pads in the throat. But of course, where else do we put on weight? We put weight on the belly. And when we put weight on the belly, it impinges the movement of the diaphragm. So that's just another factor to take into consideration. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to our presentation here. So just bear with me 1 second. And we will open it up as well in terms of questions. Okay. And what I will do is I will also bring together, what can you be bringing into your way of life? But coming back to functional breathing, always think that it's not just because people have different perceptions of the breath. Now, the exercise that we practiced today we practiced the breathe light. So this is looking at breathing from a biochemical dimension. How do you know that you're breathing light? You feel air hunger. So what's causing this sensation of air hunger? That's because there's an accumulation of carbon dioxide in the blood. But carbon dioxide isn't just a waste gas. So people often say, bring in as much oxygen as you can and get rid of the poisonous carbon dioxide. Well, carbon dioxide is produced by the body. It's a byproduct of our metabolism, but we only breathe out 15% CO2. We actually hold on to 85%. So the CO2 coming back to the lungs is about 47 millimeters of mercury, but the ideal CO2 in the lungs is 40. So we breathe out the excess, which is 7 millimeters of mercury. My point here is, if we have a habit of breathing too hard and too fast, it puts us into an increased stress response and it feeds into our resistance to our breathing during sleep. The biomechanical was just what we practiced there. Good recruitment of the diaphragm. As you breathe in, can you feel your lower ribs gently moving out? And as you breathe out, do you feel your lower ribs gently moving in? The psychophysiological is the mind-body connection. And we can convey, so there's top down and there's also bottom up. By changing your breathing patterns, you can tell the brain that you're safe. Stanford Medical researchers found this out in 2017. They identified a structure in the brain that's spying on your breathing. And if, for example, you're breathing too fast during your sleep, your brain can pick up that your body is under threat and your brain can arouse you from sleep. And as a result, you may wake up and you're there with insomnia, for example. So I'm just going to scroll back down and we will do a little bit more practice and then we're going to go on to the questions. We talked about it's really important to get your mouth closed during sleep, absolutely vitally important. Never wake up with a dry mouth in the morning, but be very, very careful if, for example, you're taping the mouth across. If you're covering the mouth, it's not particularly safe. And the only reason that I say it is because if we look at this paper here, and this was looking at people with sleep apnea, you can see that when they cover their mouth altogether, that it increased sleep apnea in a number of individuals. And those individuals tended to be more moderate to severe. You can't take a risk with it. So if you are taping the mouth, use a tape which doesn't cover the mouth. Use a tape that surrounds it. And of course, like we have our own tape, which is myotape. It's not that I'm trying to push myotape or anything like that, but just for you to bear in mind, yes, get your mouth closed during sleep. The start of getting your mouth closed during sleep is breathing through your nose during the day, breathing through your nose during physical exercise. That helps to improve your breathing patterns, strengthen the diaphragm, and also the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth is really, really important because your tongue has got two places to be. It's either in the roof of the mouth or it's falling into the throat. We talked about children's breathing. You have all of the resources for children that are available for free on myotape.com. There is a kids corner there. The main thing with children is never force them to nasal breathe. So if, for example, you have the child do the nose unblocking exercise, but if the child can't breathe comfortably through their nose after doing the exercise, you may suspect that the problem is the back of the nose, and it's only an ear, nose, and throat doctor that can identify that. We talked about sleep disorder breathing in women. They're very much more prone to insomnia and upper airway resistance syndrome. And even if you are a female and you've done a sleep study and the results have come back as negative and you're thinking to yourself, well, I have anxiety, I have panic, I'm waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I just feel there's a problem. Well, I think you're right. In terms of your sleep could be feeding into that. And that's why we want to improve sleep quality. We practice diaphragmatic breathing. We spoke about we really do want to bring balance to the autonomic nervous system. We want to reduce this stress response. As I said, poor sleep would put us into this stress response, but also if we're in an increased stress response during the day, it feeds into poor sleep. So this one here, there's an increased parasympathetic response here. So you can see that there's a weight in favor of the rest and digest response, and there's less sympathetic. Now, we don't necessarily want that either. We want it in balance. So we want a balance between the rest and digest and the fight or flight response. Waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning can be very challenging, and there's a pressure on you to fall back asleep. There's also a tendency for the mind to ruminate and a lot of thought activity going on in the mind. I found that the best approach is to hand the problem over to something else. So I know that from time to time I will wake up. I will wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, especially if I travel with jet lag. There's a pressure on me to fall back asleep. I used to practice my breathing techniques, the breathing techniques that we spoke about here, but I found an easier way to do it was to hand the problem over to something else, is to listen to a guided audio. Now, the guided audios are free, and you will find them on the website buteyko-clinic.com. So this guided audio is 18 minutes, and I'm just going to show you the page now in a moment. It's a lot easier when you wake up, have the guided audio downloaded onto your phone, have your phone on flight mode, and just listen to it. So Neve will be able to show you the link, and I'll actually put the link there actually. Neve, don't worry, I have it here. So this is the page here. So there is a guided audio, you download it to your device, and this is when you wake up, either you have difficulty falling asleep, or you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And listen to the 18 minutes. It's specifically scripted to induce relaxation and to guide you with breathing. And it kind of takes the pressure off you having to fall back asleep. So there's a little bit in there. Now, there's also a guided audio that I recorded about 15 years ago. It still works. And it's this 20-minute guided audio. So this one is specifically if you're feeling tired during the day. So say, for example, you're feeling sluggish at 1 o'clock in the day. Take 20 minutes out and listen to the guided audio. It will bring you into a deep rest. And it can be very, very helpful as a reset. And after the 20-minute guided audio, that you'll have energy then to cope with the rest of your day. But it's also quite relaxing, because it's specifically recorded to help bring you into relaxation and to improve your breathing patterns. Giving ourselves some attention is really, really important. So on this page here, it's free. Just download the audio for if you wake up if you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, or if you have difficulty falling asleep, that's one guided audio. And the second guided audio is you're a little bit tired at 2 or 3 o'clock in the day, then you can just listen to this. It's a 20-minute break, and it'll give you the energy then to continue with the rest of your day. I would genuinely say they help. I use them myself, so I can say firsthand, but we've also seen many, many people over the years. Like initially, I recorded them for my clients, so they're there for you. Neve, I'm just going to finish these couple of slides and then we'll go to questions. So that's the guided audio. And we also talked about if you're waking up feeling tired, you can have a 20-minute session. So you also have that in the link, which is there. Now, in terms of the application of breathing, this is a summary of everything that we did. So simply taping the mouth is not enough. Very often we hear, and it's gone viral, oh, get your mouth closed during sleep, tape up your mouth. In fairness, the advice is good, but we need to go beyond that. You also need to improve your everyday breathing patterns. Now, the breathing patterns that I talked about today make nasal breathing a way of life for you. It is absolutely vital. I was a chronic mouth breather. It got me into breathing, and I will genuinely say there is a massive difference between continuous mouth breathing and continuous nasal breathing. The research is there. The mouth has no functions in terms of breathing other than allowing air in and out of the body. But other than that, the mouth does nothing for the breath. Nature did not design the mouth to breathe. Everything is in the nose. All of the functions as it relates to breathing is in the nasal cavity, the nasal airway. So it's very important during rest and also even during physical exercise. Now I'm talking about light, zone 1, zone 2, physical exercise. And the more you do physical exercise with your mouth closed, your body adapts to it. So physical exercise actually does get easier with nasal breathing. And I wrote a book 10 years ago called The Oxygen Advantage on that. Some of you might have read it, but that was all about nose breathing during sports. Now, I have submitted a new book in terms of sleep, which is due out in the United States by Humanics Books. And I think it's called The Sleep Cure, but it's not available until June of this year. Keep the mouth closed and your tongue resting in the roof of the mouth because this helps to open up the airway. Very, very important. Always wake up with a moist mouth and your tongue resting in the roof of the mouth. We spoke about if you have a stuffy nose, especially with hay fever season coming upon us, and typically with allergic rhinitis or hay fever, it can impact your sleep. You never just have a stuffy nose, you're also more likely to feel tired. There are also studies showing that individuals with a stuffy nose have reduced cognitive function. So we as human beings, we need to be able to plan, we need to be able to reason, to make decisions, to decide on a course of action. So that's cognitive function. This is the front part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the executive part of the brain, but that is impacted when the nose is stuffy. Now, is it because a stuffy nose impacts your sleep? I don't know the full connection there. I don't think the researchers did. They thought that it was the presence of inflammation which was causing the nose to be stuffy, and also inflammation can impact your sleep because maybe inflammation is a testament that we're in an increased stress response. We did quite a few sessions breathing light. I think it's an amazing exercise. It's so accessible. I know it's a bit tricky. You know, you're gently softening and slowing down your breathing to the point of air hunger. You're wanting to sustain that air hunger, but check in on how your body reacts. And that's why I asked you to put it into chat. Many of you felt that your hands were warmer. You've got increased watery saliva in the mouth. You're feeling sleepy. You're activating the rest and digest response. That's what we need for sleep. You know, how can we switch off? There's so much activity going on today. Mobile phones, of course, don't help in any shape or form. I've deleted all social media apps from my phone. I have no social media apps on my phone whatsoever. I don't want to be giving attention to something that's going to impact my ability to pay attention. And social media apps, I felt, were hampering my own attention. And not that I was a major user, but I was kind of conscious enough of it that I'd be on the app and I was saying, okay, what's ultimately the reasoning behind all of this social media? It is to capture your attention. Well, I want to be able to direct my attention to where I want to direct it upon, and I don't want to be swayed. So I just got rid of all of the social media apps. Breathing slow, very important, because this helps to bring balance to the autonomic nervous system, and breathing deep. And all of this is not just activating the relaxation response, it's improving your everyday breathing patterns because it's not just about your airway. The resistance to your breathing during sleep, of course, the airway is one factor, and a narrow airway increases resistance. But if you have a habit of breathing fast and hard during sleep, that too is contributing to increased resistance. We measured your control pause. The length of your breath hold time gives you feedback on your everyday breathing. We looked at Messino's paper, and he estimated loop gain as a characteristic in obstructive sleep apnea, that if you have a low breath hold time, you have high loop gain. And that's why control pause and your breath hold time too is very, very important. So let's have some questions. The audios don't have binaural beats. I just kept them very, very simple. You know, I think simple is sometimes the best, but they work. So irrespective of whatever beats in the background, listen to them. So Niamh, how are we going to manage this one?
Yes, there's lots and lots of questions there in
Sure.
chat, and so many questions about breathing and exercise. I think we'll have to do another webinar on breathing techniques for exercising because there's just so
Totally.
many questions about it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and we couldn't like in terms of the application of nasal breathing during exercise, I would say start it today. And if at any point you feel that the air hunger is too much for you, just slow down the pace. So just kind of adapt that into your daily life now today. And you will find that the more you breathe through your nose during physical exercise, that your body adapts to it. Now, we could do a full 2 hours just on the application of physical exercise, nasal breathing during physical exercise, all of the benefits, a training program, what you would expect, etc. And I think there's a 5K run challenge going on at the moment, isn't there? Nasal breathing challenge, Niamh.
we have the nasal 5K challenge, and there's lots to learn in that. So if you're a beginner to nasal breathing and exercise, we'll pop the link to the nasal 5K challenge in the follow-up email. And it includes so many resources and and studies and things, so you can learn about the benefits of breathing for exercising there.
Yeah, great, great.
We have a
Well,
message from Cindy. She's asking, would you recommend taping with a CPAP?
I totally, but on the basis that you're able to breathe through your nose. So I think that's always the first thing that we want to do. We never want to just, get the mouth closed without ensuring that the individual is able to breathe through the nose, first of all. So what I would say there, what's her name?
Cindy.
Cindy, to start breathing in and out through your nose during physical exercise, during rest, and then getting the mouth closed with CPAP. Now, it has been tested, and there have been a number of studies looking at getting the mouth closed while wearing the CPAP. Number one is that the effect of the CPAP is more effective when your mouth is closed, because, of course, if you're taking pressure and it's helping to splint open the airways, you don't want mouth leaks. You think about a CPAP machine, that's directing air at the pressure to help open up the airway. But if your mouth is open, that air can leak out through the mouth. And also, the other thing about CPAP was that they looked at compliance with individuals who were wearing CPAP. Mouth breathers had reduced compliance. Only 30% of them complied with their CPAP. 70% of the individuals with breathing in and out through the nose were compliant. So I think there's a huge impact. The mandibular advancement device. Now, in terms of supplemental oxygen, that's something obviously that your doctor has made a decision on, because your doctor has felt that your blood oxygen saturation is dropping too low. There could be a couple of things going on here. There may be that the lungs, in terms of somebody with COAD, chronic obstructive airways disease, or COPD, or somebody with severe asthma, that there's not a good gas exchange taking place and oxygen is reducing in the blood as a result of it, or that the individual has obstructive sleep apnea, central sleep apnea. They stop breathing, their blood oxygen saturation drops. I can't comment on that. It's just that whatever you were doing with your doctor, to stay with that. But I would still say to you is practice the gentle techniques that we did here. So no COPD or asthma. Well, if you're wearing a CPAP machine, the objective of the CPAP is to help ensure steady breathing for you. Now, if you're having steady breathing and air is able to move freely to and from the lungs, and there's a good gas exchange from the lungs into the blood, well, if the CPAP is doing its job, one would expect that blood oxygen saturation is normal. But I don't know, of course, your specific case. So I think that could be a question. Just ask your doctor, check your CPAP, or if you're wearing mandibular advancement device. You also spoke about central apnea. Central apnea is when the brain doesn't send a signal to breathe. It can be, it's not so common, but it can occur alongside obstructive sleep apnea. This can be due to overshoot. So say, for example, we talked about individuals with sleep apnea and 30% of what's called high loop gain. People with high loop gain are very sensitive to the accumulation of carbon dioxide. They stop breathing during sleep because their airway collapses. Carbon dioxide is accumulating in the lungs and blood. But they're so sensitive to the increase of CO2 that when they resume breathing with such exaggerated ventilation. And it's the exaggerated ventilation which is causing a loss of carbon dioxide. So now their CO2 goes from too high to too low. And when carbon dioxide goes too low, the brain doesn't send the signal to breathe. So central apnea could be related to an individual with high loop gain in obstructive sleep apnea. So that lady there with the oxygen, measure your breath hold time. Was it low? And if it's low, really put this stuff into practice. Yeah. So it kind of adds a little tool that could possibly help you there. Anything else, Neve?
Yes, okay. So there are a number of people asking about the physiological sigh and yawning.
Yeah, so okay, the physiological side induces relaxation. I'm not sure if it's for everybody. The only risk with the physiological sigh is that when you're taking a full big breath, it could increase your risk of overbreathing, which is not ideal. Anytime that I want to calm down, it's similar to the physiological sigh, but I just don't take the full big breath in. All I do, I take a soft breath in through my nose and I have a really slow and relaxed and a gentle exhalation. Because when you have a slow and relaxed and gentle exhalation, you're conveying to the brain that you're safe. So the other thing about this is that I want to have a breathing technique that's accessible, that nobody can see what I'm doing. So if I'm going into an interview, it could be radio, it could be TV, or it could be going out on stage or giving a presentation, I need to access flow. I need to dampen any stress response. I need to get my mind in the right frame of mind. How do I do it? Prior to going out on stage, as I'm standing there, I take a soft breath in through my nose and a really slow and relaxed, gentle breath out. It helps to bring down the speed of my heart rate. I put the critical mind aside, I bring my attention into the moment, and I talk from that point of view. I found it very helpful. I think it's a great little tool. I'm not going to go out on stage standing there taking full big breaths, such as a physiological sigh. I want to have something that nobody can see anything, that it's almost like it's something that you can use without seeing it. So the physiological side, there is a risk of overbreathing. So, you know, that's why I'm not always keen, because I can only think of the people who are in a heightened state of stress. Could it be the best thing for them, or would they be better off just taking a soft breath in through their nose and a relaxed and gentle, slow breath out? Yeah. Suppose listen to your body, but just bear in mind if you're taking full big breaths and if you're doing repeatedly the physiological sigh, what is it doing in terms of your blood gases? That's the only thing.
And over on YouTube, we have a question from Joseph. He's asking about his son. My son has enlarged tonsils and is a mouth breather. Can breathing exercises reduce the size of them? We're
We
hoping
have
to
no
avoid
evidence.
surgery.
We have no evidence, Neve. There's no studies on it. We have seen people in terms of children with enlarged adenoids that once they did get breathing in and out through the nose, that the adenoids can shrink. I think it's a very tricky one. I don't know straight off. The problem is that, I suppose, coming back to the child, if a child has enlarged tonsils and the child is having sleep problems, that is a big problem. That's a big, big problem. Um, that's that's not something that we want to take a gamble on. I think that the tonsils need to be addressed, because if the child is poor sleep, it's really going to be problematic. So yeah, I know it's not nice, and I put my own daughter through it. I felt at the time, maybe afterwards, I kind of regretted her having her adenoids and tonsils out. But yeah, I don't know. Case by case. Yeah, if my child had enlarged tonsils to the point that it was really causing her sleep issues and it can be affecting academic achievement and affecting her mood and concentration and brain development and everything else, I think it would have to be addressed. Now, the other thing that I would say is that once the adenoids and tonsils are removed, it's very important that the child restores nasal breathing. So the child is mouth breathing at the moment. The child will have developed the mouth breathing habit. So even when the nose is treated and also when the tonsils are removed, we have to change the mouth breathing habit. So the child does have to learn how to breathe in and out through the nose. Otherwise, the effects of the tonsillectomy are only short term. There's a 68% worsening in the child's sleep within 3 years unless nasal breathing is restored. Now, typically, ear, nose, and throat doctors will remove the adenoids and tonsils, but they will not provide any follow-up long-term, nor will they give you any advice in terms of nasal breathing post tonsillectomy and adenoidectomy. The research is on that it's very important to restore nasal breathing post adenoidectomy and tonsillectomy. Yeah, but you'll find the exercise for free on our website. Go to myotape.com, Kids Corner. All of the exercises are there.
Okay, and we have a few people asking about myotape. Is myotape a training tool that you would have to use forever, or can we learn how to use it for a designated time going forwards? Yeah, just in general, lots of questions about myotape and also how to use it, how much of the mouth to cover.
Oh, do you know what? I'll just do a demonstration on it. Now I've the orange one with me here, which is it's not the normal color. The normal color is kind of skin color, but just so that you can see it. And so this is the tape here. I stretch it about 30% this way. I put one part here and I gently press it. So it's elasticated cotton. And because of the elasticity, there's pull. So you can see the slight pout there. So it's pulling my lips together. so that I breathe in and out through my nose. But if I have to mouth puff, say for example, somebody with sleep apnea, I can mouth puff. I'm sure some of you have seen that. You might have seen it with your partners. They're breathing in through the nose, they're puffing out through the mouth. That's why you can't cover the mouth. Because if we cover the mouth, you can't mouth puff. But where's the air going to go? Can't go anywhere if it's not getting out through the nose fast enough. And that's why it can increase the AHI. So in terms of, yeah, it's very important that it allows mouth puffing and the myotape does that. Is mouth puffing okay? Well, I suppose, Cindy, mouth puffing is not okay, but you're better off mouth puffing than forcing it not to happen. Because if you just cover the mouth to completely stop mouth puffing, then it can worsen sleep apnea. So that's the risk there. So if you, for example, improve everyday breathing patterns, if you have the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth, if you're helping to open up the airway, if you have a connection with the diaphragm, etc., all of that can feed into better breathing during sleep and could reduce the risk of mouth puffing. Something else, was there another part of that question, Neve? Oh yeah, do you need to use it all the time? I have to confess, I still tape. I didn't do it last night, but there's times I may not do it, but generally I'll actually tape. And the reason being is because it's like a crutch for me. As soon as I just put the tape on, it's almost a signal for me to fall asleep, and that's why I do it. So I actually feel it's quite comfortable. And I was using 3M 1-inch micropore tape for many, many years until we had our own tape. And even with that, I was still using the 3M, so yeah, I think it's just something that it's like brushing my teeth. It's almost like a signal to fall asleep quicker. Could you please mention any points on breathing in case of autism spectrum condition and ADHD? There's a very interesting study that was carried in the UK. It was 11,049 British school kids, and it was published in the journal Pediatrics in 2012. And the researcher is a New York lady, Karen Bonnock is her name. And she was involved in the study, and this is the study here. So her conclusion was she looked at over 11,000 children and she tracked them from age 6 months to 57 months. Children with a history of sleep disorders or behavioral sleep problems, if they have this at 5 years of age and if it's untreated, they had a 40% increased risk of special education needs by age 8. Now, I think this is shocking. And it's probably more shocking because nobody seems to be talking about it. So she looked at these children's sleep from age 6 months to 57 months. And that basically was her conclusion that 40%. So if a child is snoring or mouth breathing or stopping breathing at age 5, and if that child continues snoring, stopping breathing or mouth breathing, age 6, age 7, age 8, it's associated with nearly 40% increased risk of special education needs. Now, you might ask, how come is that? Problems with poor sleep in a child is that if a child has poor sleep, it may affect brain development, and it can cause neuronal damage, particularly during the critical early developmental periods when the child is young. So slow wave sleep is your deep sleep. So this is the most restorative form of sleep. We need this for children. We need it for adults. So earlier on, I was talking about stage 1 is light sleep, stage 2 is slightly deeper, and stage 3 is where all the good stuff happens, is deep sleep. And this is largely governed by the frontal cortex. So this is the part of the brain just behind the forehead. And this is mediating then higher functions such as decision making, ambition. Now, if, for example, we have reduced sleep quality, it can affect prefrontal cortex. So it can impact our decision-making decision. It can cause increased rumination of the mind. So she talked about poor sleep. It can affect behavior, cognition, language development, delayed development, speech language impairment, adverse behavioral and cognitive effects. And she said in the United States, 3 million individuals aged between 6 and 21 years of age They receive special education for conditions associated with sleep disorders and in brackets developmental delay, learning disability and autism. And 40% to 80% also have attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Now, my own experience working with kids with autism, I didn't always make progress with them. It depended really on how severe was their autism. If they understood the exercise, if they're more on the mild spectrum, I was able to get the exercise across. For the kids with a more severe spectrum, I didn't have the tools to communicate it with to those children. Um, so Katie is, I suppose it depends on the spectrum. Do the children understand it? I think it's really worthwhile asking the question for all of those individuals, ask them about their sleep quality. I think there's such a high connection between poor sleep and how it can be impacting the mind, including contributing to ADD, ADHD, etc. Now, there was a question there by Cindy. I am giving a face-to-face training at the Vivus Institute in Denver, Colorado, and I think it's I'm not sure of the dates actually, the 19th to the 21st of June, it could be, or it could be later in June. So it's primarily for people who are working in the health and wellness space about training. It's instructor training in Buteyko breathing so that you can then work with your clients and teach your clients. So I'm not sure if you're a healthcare provider or not, but maybe that's something that might be of interest. Any suggestions for somebody who is told they have adult onset asthma due to bronchitis? So, Janet, typically adult onset asthma happens as a result of stress. Commonly, I'm not going to say it is in your case, but what I will say with any person with asthma, practice everything that we did today. Practice everything we did. Um, People with asthma very often have sleep issues too, and as asthma severity increases, so do sleep problems. Breathing in and out through the nose, so vitally important for people with asthma. Addressing breathing volume, doing the breathe light exercise, very important. And we have 20 clinical trials with the Buteyko method for asthma. And typically we would expect a reduction of symptoms of 50% in 2 weeks. Now I know that's a bold claim to make, but I'm saying that based on 23 years of working with people. That's my experience with it. And we also have 20 clinical trials looking at the effect of changing breathing patterns in people with asthma. Now, you also have to consider, the upper airways and the lower airways are not two airways. It's one airway. Whatever's happening in your lungs will travel up to the nose, and whatever's happening in your nose will travel down to the lungs. So it's a unified airway. So that's probably why the connection between people with asthma and poor sleep as well. So Janet, put everything that we did today into practice. Really put it into practice. Yeah, because I would genuinely say to you, it can make a big difference. Can we review our child's sleep ourselves, or do we assume they're having poor quality sleep if they're mouth breathing all the time? I suppose, Jane, you can pick up on indicators. Number one is in an ideal environment, you wouldn't hear a child breathing during sleep. So, say for example, you go into your child, listen to their breathing, and if you can hear their breathing, it's not ideal. Now, then if you hear the child snoring, that's definitely not ideal. And if you hear the child breathing, but then they stop breathing for 2 breaths or more, that's absolutely not ideal. So, of course, you can check in on the child. How is the child breathing? Yeah, but only a sleep study will really identify it. And then check in on other things. Are their bedclothes trashed in the morning? Because a child who has got quite disrupted sleep, they twist and turn often during the night. Does the child bedwet? So a child may be 13 or 14 years of age and still bedwetting. How is their attention in school? A child with poor sleep will have poor attention. Do they have a stuffy nose? Do they mouth breathe quite often? So there are things that you can really be looking at in terms of. Now, I've put all of this into a book called The Breathing Cure, and I've put 2 chapters there, chapter 8 and something else for children. So The Breathing Cure, it's published in the United States with Humanics Books, And there's 2 chapters specifically for children, and all of that information is in that. So I think it's about $20. Can mouth breathing help with blood pressure? I don't think mouth breathing is ideal, Claire, with blood pressure, high blood pressure. There's quite a few studies coming out looking at the application of breathing exercises for high blood pressure. The slow breathing can be very, very important. Light breathing can be important. Breathing exercises to help strengthen the diaphragm can be very, very important. So we really need to think about the autonomic nervous system here, and we want to help dampen the stress response. Now, the other thing about high blood pressure is you have to consider, how are you breathing during sleep? So we spoke quite a bit here today in terms of if we have poor sleep, such as insomnia, snoring, and obstructive sleep apnea, it can put us into an increased stress response. The problem with the increased stress response due to poor sleep quality is that that increased stress response carries into the day, and that then in turn can drive up blood pressure. So there's often an association between poor sleep quality and especially obstructive sleep apnea and how it's increasing high blood pressure. Using the exercise that we use today can be helpful because it can help dampen the stress response and it can help induce relaxation. So, going for a walk with your mouth closed, everything that we discussed today will apply for high blood pressure. Because ultimately what we're trying to do is improve or strengthen the baroreflex. So these are pressure receptors in the major blood vessels to make them more sensitive. And we can have an impact on the baroreflex to help lower high blood pressure. Yeah, so it's really worth doing everything that we did today. Listen to the guided audios too. Anything that helps with relaxation, it will help dampen the stress response. And very often, we feel that life is so busy, and life does kind of put us into that we don't give ourselves enough time. We don't give ourselves enough attention. I think it's important. Where's the limit when you can switch from nose to mouth breathing during exercise, for example, aerobic exercise while cycling? Is it when you feel out of breath? So, or checking in with heart zones 1 and 2. It's really about the switch from nose breathing to mouth breathing is dependent on perceived effort. So I wouldn't necessarily go with heart zones because number 1, what's your control pause or bolt score? The lower your control pause, the more difficult you will find it to nasal breathe during exercise. Your nasal airway is the second one. The degree of adaptation to nasal breathing. So there's more to it, just to answer your question there. But yeah, so we don't typically go with heart rate zones, go with perceived effort. I couldn't use tape or mandibular advancement for a week and my sleep quality decreased significantly, including SpO2. I suppose, Beth, that's testimony that getting your mouth closed is very, very important. So, and wearing your mandibular advancement device. From Dr. Joe, have you ever worked with people who have deep vein thrombosis? Oh, I'd be really keen to know. 10 years collapsed lung, what common faults you may have found? And I haven't. So, yeah, unfortunately, I haven't worked with deep vein thrombosis. The main people that I've worked with over the years are people with asthma and respiratory complaints, people with sleep issues, and people with anxiety and panic disorders. Sean, you want to come in there?
Yeah, I'll just say that anything that creates venous stagnation is going to possibly lead to a thickening of the blood, and the diaphragm is the main draw of the blood from the legs. So, activity we know using the legs helps, but that diaphragm has to be ultimately the most important thing to bring that blood up. That's what brings the blood up is muscle activity, and then the diaphragm's ability to create that decreased pressure in the thorax that then things come up because the venous blood has a very low pressure.
Right.
So that's my suggestion.
So do physical exercise with the mouth closed with good recruitment of the diaphragm. Thank you, Sean, as always. Can you share the link, please, to the ASD? I'm sure that's the ADHD. Have you got that, Neve?
Yes, with Karen Bonnock, and we'll include all those links in the follow-up email.
Great, great. So Cherry has been using MyoTape for 4 months, and I still wake up with a dry mouth. Just wondering, Cherry, are you stretching it enough to have that pull? So remember to stretch it about 30%, because sometimes I feel that some people don't stretch it enough. It's not about stretching it too much, but it's also about stretching it enough. So when you stretch it about 30%, you should feel a pull, that it's pulling the lips together. The other thing that I would say, Sherry, is really think about your breathing in your normal everyday life. How are you breathing during exercise? How are you breathing during rest? Practice the breathing exercises. Yeah, so it's not just about taping them out, but think of your everyday breathing alongside that as well. I'm thinking that certain of my meds, well, meds can cause a dry mouth. Some meds can, so that could be a possibility. Am I missing anything, Neve? First couple of breaths, I can keep it quite low, slow, deep, but revert to normal breathing. What is the recommendation about the practice time or number of breaths, or is it just practice? So that's from Rag Vendra. It's really about trying 4 minutes. So do little blocks of 4 minutes. Do 4 minutes of a block of reduced volume breathing, breathing less air, breathe light. Then take a little rest for about a minute and do another 4 minutes. So you want to have the air hunger for not just for the first few breaths. You're looking to get the air hunger for 4 minutes. And air hunger as well. The interesting thing about this is if you have air hunger for more than 1 minute, now you're going to be increasing blood flow to the brain. So I think that's really, really important, and don't over kind of think about it either. Like if we keep it very simple, you're lying back into a comfortable chair, put one hand on your chest, one hand just above your navel, and just gently soften and slow down everything. So it's not about forcing it into place. It's just kind of working with it, allowing your breathing to be softer and slower to the point of air hunger and working with that. So
Lots of
anything else?
questions and comments also about children, and I think we covered a little bit about children's breathing in this session. But yeah, like I said, we'll have to do a dedicated session for children also.
Yeah. I think we will, Neve. I think because again, there's too much to give it justice. So we can do, there's 2 of them, there's 3 of them actually. We can do one on asthma for World Asthma Day, which is I think the 6th of May. We can do one for children's, and we can do one for nasal breathing, running, and physical exercise. Yeah. Okay. Anything else at that?
I think we've covered so much now already.
Great. Great. Okay. I just like to say thanks so much. You've given me 2 hours, myself and Neve, 2 hours of your time, and there's still 191 of you here, which is pretty much amazing. Breathing has, of course, I'm going to be very biased and say that, it really has a wonderful impact. It's what I've seen over the years. It's free, it's accessible. Work in what we discussed today, and I will genuinely say that it can make a difference to your sleep, and quite a significant difference. So it was about breathing in and out through the nose. It was about having the tongue resting on the roof of the mouth. It was about practicing breathing less air, breathing light, and breathing slow. And I think it's really important to tell the brain that we're safe, because there's so many things in life, they are driving us into an increased stress response. And the increased stress response is impacting our sleep. Our sleep is poor, and that's feeding into the increased stress response. And as human beings, we really need to have something to help counter the stress, and that's one of them. So breathing, I wish you well. Thank you very much, Neve. Thank you, Sean, and thank you to everybody who is here today, and all the best and good luck. Bye.
Cheers, everyone.